evening. It's Tuesday night, it's 8 o'clock, and this is The Issue. I'm Mark Carr with my co-host tonight, Casey Cosgrove. Casey, welcome to the show again.
Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well. Are you ready to get into some action tonight?
I think this is going to be a good one.
Tell the folks what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Well, we have 4 schools in Burlington slated for potential closure. We have people who represent those schools here joining us tonight to talk about what that's going to mean to their neighborhood, to kids, to the community, and have that discussion. And it's a heated one right now, so I think it's going to be an interesting night.
And our viewers can get involved in the conversation by going to Twitter, #TheIssue, let us know what you think, or Facebook, The Issue, and you can join the conversation. Our social media guru, Kim Slon-White, is in the control room, and she'll be handling all the social media tonight. So let's get right down to it, Casey, and who are our guests?
Well, we have Dania Thurman from Central High School and Russell Thacker from Nelson High School in Burlington.
Glad you guys could come out tonight and talk about your particular issues.
We will have from Bateman High School and Pearson High School represented in the second half of the show. So we have all 4 schools who have this cloud hanging over their head represented tonight.
Well, there's been a lot of talk today at Cogeco TV. A lot of calls wanting to know when we were on the air tonight and what the issues we're going to be talking about. Also from trustees. Won't mention any names. Also, members of provincial parliament have wanted to know, so we would welcome them to call in. And Joey's going to run the phone number under us here. So we'd like to hear from the MPPs. We'd also like to hear from school board trustees if they dare. So I'll let you start with the first question.
Well, absolutely. I think Central's our downtown school. They've been dealing with this kind of cloud, to use the same word I used a minute ago, for quite a while. So I just want maybe Dania, just give me your overall sense of what this has meant to folks like you who are fighting for the school.
Well, we've been in this since day one, as you know, obviously, being named initially in the recommendation. And coming from a very strong community, we have a very solid group of parents and community members who've been just actively working on scenarios and information and the data and some of the things that have been questionable along the way. Losing a downtown school is a huge concern, I think, for a whole city. It does tend to have a ripple effect on the downtown community, and eventually people start to move out. And that downtown, which is now thriving, you've got the Sound of Music Festival and all these things that are going on downtown, many stores. They do
and
eventually
we won't have those
start
at the closed Central?
They will start to move out. It has happened in many communities, and it does create that ripple effect. When families start to move out, then your businesses start to leave, and that's the way it is. People move downtown for a reason. They want the walkability.
I don't think you can look at the closure of a school to that extent.
You absolutely can, because people move downtown for a reason, and because they want a walkable community. They want to be able to leave their cars at home. You've got your bus terminal, you've got your GO station, you've got everything you need. You have your grocery stores, you can walk everywhere. We have a real mix of demographics downtown.
And so just because a school closes,
people will.
The rest of that doesn't go away. You can still walk to grocery stores. You've still got the bus terminal down there. You've still got the activities like Sound of Music.
But when the school leaves, people will move to their schools, to where their kids can walk to school.
Mark,
and they will leave.
There are 2 key sort of parts of the long-term strategic plan that talk about walkable, the city strategic plan. So there's a disconnect here.
25 years.
Yeah, but the
it.
notion of a walkable, everybody, I think, would prefer that their kids walk to school.
Absolutely.
That you live in range, and also about attracting. I don't agree.
I'm
You
not
talk
sure
about
attracting.
What, walkable neighborhoods?
I'm not
How can you
sure-
argue against that?
I'm not sure that people still wouldn't drive their kids to school.
I'd have to agree with Mark because I mean, there's a majority of families that live easily within walking distance of Nelson or Bateman or any other schools, and I would even say Central. There's a lot of parents. There's a lot of cars first thing in the morning. There's the 5-minute glut of cars and buses that come rushing in. I've experienced it myself. So I would agree that though the schools are walkable, a lot of parents are still dropping their kids off.
We live in the parents might be driving their kids to school, but let's look at downtown, just specifically downtown. You've got low-income neighborhoods. You have people that need to walk to school. Yes, there's lots of cars, but there are a lot of people that are walking to school.
And that's the thing with Central.
But if the school wasn't there, they'd have a school bus to take them to another school.
And everybody's, but we're talking about a downtown
Now that's an
area.
interesting point that you make, because the Halton District School Board actively promotes walking and biking to school because it benefits the mental and physical health of students, all students, not any one particular set of students. So you have a board who's talking about closing an almost 100% walkable school and busing all those students, almost 100% of those students, out of the community. There's an effect on the environment there. There's an effect on the infrastructure there, right? You're talking about bringing buses in. We don't have buses at Central right now. You might say that there are buses, there are cars. I actually help out at the breakfast program some mornings. You can look outside. There is not any 10-minute period where you see car after car after car after car after car. We have many students in our area whose parents may not even have vehicles, who do need to walk. They have younger siblings who are next door at Little Central that they can take care of, drop off at school, pick them up after, so their parents who need to work before and after school are able to do that. Right?
Okay, let's move away from that issue a little bit, and let's get at the actual closure. Now, I understand that the provincial guidelines say 65%, and then they should look at the schools for closure, as far as the student population is concerned. But I understand Central and Nelson
We're both above that.
Yep.
are significantly above that.
Yep.
So why?
I really only think there's only, Nelson's position, unlike Central's had the advantage or disadvantage of being
absolutely
involved right off the bat. As Nelson families, we woke up one day to suddenly finding out that, hey, guess what, your name's on the block. I was very quick to talk to the Director of Education, to Stuart Miller, and ask him specifically, okay, so how do we get from here to here? And while there was enough interest by park members, and I specifically asked him, I said, how many park members? How many park members does it take to make you?
Can you explain what park
Okay,
is?
so the PAR is the Program Allocation Review. That is the process in which the school board then goes to the ministry and says, we have below 65% utilization of our schools. We have a disparity of access to programming of students. So, for example, you have Aldershot, which has 400 students, and you have Hayden, which has in excess of 1,000 students. So you may have a grade 12 student who wants advanced calculus at Aldershot who cannot get access to programming because provincial funding won't allow them to get a teacher. Meanwhile, you have students at Hayden who have 30 kids waiting on a waiting list that can't get advanced calculus because there's too many kids. So the program, the idea of the program is to create a uniform attendance at the school so that utilization falls between 90 to 95%. The student body's around 1,000, and that's sort of when everything clicks and the students get the best out of the system.
Okay, and that's PAR.
That's PAR.
Okay,
PARC is basically then what the board does is the board goes away and came up with 19 recommendations, of which they said they put forward 19B, which was the initial recommendation.
It was just 19 at
19,
that point.
19
It was
that
just
put
19.
Central and Pearson on the board for closure and adjusting the boundaries. Then the next step of the process is to get consultation by PARC, which is the parent PAR committee, which it consists of a board board member and a parent volunteer representative from each school.
Two parent volunteers from each school. Yeah.
And well, I mean, and some is one of ours is actually on the parent council as well. So 2 parent volunteers who then sit and they're supposed to help the board sift through the various options. They can come up with more options or not. So then it went from 19 initially, ballooned up to 40 plus, and then down to 30 something that they have now. Various options of different scenarios of schools. You know,
they
changing.
have 7 now.
Yeah.
7
well,
left
then
on
they
the
then they
table.
out of
Now
that
they're
they
at
picked
7,
out
yeah.
they picked out the 7 or the is it 7 or
Now,
6? I was told it was 6.
Now, who
Seven would be
is
status quo.
they?
Okay, so the park assists the board in making a recommendation or suggestions on what they feel is recommendations that should go forward. The Director of Education, Stuart
Then
Miller,
makes the recommendation.
he
to the
then
trustee.
analyzes, he can recommend, he has to write a report, and then that goes to the trustees
But
for vote.
the park committee doesn't actually
Enact
make
any-
any
yeah.
recommendation at all. They just provide information and collect information and give opinions. They don't actually make a physical recommendation.
That's correct. They're supposed to be the voice. They're
At-
supposed to be the voice.
At this point, maybe we should explain to the viewers, Casey, where you live and your
Okay, I see.
relationship
Well,
to Nelson.
So one of the reasons I wanted to cover this topic tonight, you know, I'm a Bateman/Elgin grad who also used to work at General Brock. My kids go to Nelson, and my wife and her whole family had gone to Central. So I kind of, you know, I haven't moved from the south of Burlington in my 50 years, and I think this is a community issue, not just a neighborhood. This isn't a not in my backyard issue, Mark. When they pave over a school, I've seen several in my neighborhood paved over. Once a school's gone, it's gone. So just let me quickly go
Well,
through for the
not
viewers.
necessarily
Okay, let me go
gone.
quickly for the viewers to let them know what,
Okay,
what the options are
and
now.
If you
Yeah.
could.
I'll be quick.
And then we're going to go to a break.
3C is close Nelson, 4B is close Bateman, 7B is no closures, 19B is close Central and Pearson, 23D is close Bateman and Pearson, and 28C is close Central and Pearson. So there's a combination of the folks we have here tonight. But every person I've talked to, based on how this process is unfolded, doesn't understand. They don't want to see any schools closed. They don't want to pit against each other. They're all unique. But so I'll leave it at that until you. Yeah.
Okay, and we're going to take a break right now. But I'd like you to consider this question during the break. At what point do we close a school? What are the criteria that should be applied? If you say the formula, provincial formula, is wrong, what numbers would you two say should be the numbers for the closure of a school? Because you can't carry on a school with 2 students and give them the full kind of education. So I'll leave that with you, and we'll maybe answer that when we get back. Right here on The Issue, I'm Mark Carr. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr with my co-host Casey Cosgrove. Incidentally, Casey is a leadership teacher with the University of Guelph and a community activist. And we'll move that community activist to the top of the list
I'm not sure
tonight.
what that means still. You do that every week, a community activist. I'm not out waving signs. Oh, I guess I have.
Yeah,
been.
you are-
I've
you
seen
are-
with a
you
sign
are
out there
tonight.
recently,
You are
but-
tonight.
But you did have a question you wanted to ask, but I want to jump in real quick though, because I do want to ask Russell, because we went off on another tangent. You know, sort of your feeling on why not Nelson.
As I had said earlier, I mean, Nelson woke up one day to find out that we were part of the process. There was a lot of confusion, a very short period of time to kind of rally the families together. I encouraged everybody within our community to sort of not focus on how we got on the list, but sort of to kind of pick apart. Well, there's a park framework that they use to rate and justify the closures, and some of them are fiscal responsibility. That would be busing. I mean, to your point as well, I mean, if Nelson were to close, you're now busing a large percentage of those students somewhere else. So there's environmental impact, there's fiscal responsibility. Accessibility Act. Nelson is probably one of the lower cost schools in order to make for accessibility. Central, unfortunately, is probably one of the higher expense schools because it has not been fortunate enough to been granted the money that it should have had ages ago to be renovated. And again, I say that only because our Nelson position is we're not advocating Central to be closed, Pearson to be closed, any of this. I think it really needs to look at the process is flawed. The provincial funding process is flawed in the way the system. I would like to see the provincial government put a halt on it. I would like them to look at the
This really is a provincial issue.
It is a provincial issue.
Isn't
It's
an issue
absolutely.
with trustees here in Burlington or anywhere. It's really a provincial issue because everybody that I talk to said, even MPPs say that the formula is flawed. So why haven't they changed it?
But I don't know. But I mean, getting back to sort of Casey's point, I mean, Nelson is ranked one of the highest in Burlington in the Fraser report, and from an education standpoint. Unfortunately, co-curriculars aren't necessarily a reflection on the decision-making matrix that the committee gets to use or the board gets to use. Our co-curricular programs are outstanding. Our gifted program has been there for 15 years. So there's kids that are, and gifted doesn't mean smart kids. It means kids that have special needs and special framework towards, and they're in a stable environment. When people brought in Bateman to the argument as well, and I've always said, yes, we're close in proximity. We're two totally different environments. We're providing two totally different services to the students of Halton. What I struggle with most of this whole situation is Burlington is a community as a whole. This process is tearing the community apart.
Absolutely.
It's pitting friend and neighbor against neighbor because we're fighting for what is our natural instinct, is that's our children.
But should you? And let me ask the question first. At what point do you think that both of your schools are not valid to continue?
Okay.
What percentage of student population is?
I don't think either of our schools fall into that.
No,
at all.
but I'm saying if you wanted to change a formula, that's something that you would have to think about because whether the accommodations review, I mean, at some point it has to say there aren't enough students here. What is that point?
I don't think it's a number. I don't think it's a number. I think that there need to be factors involved that are not involved now. I think you need to look at things like quality of life for these students.
Agreed.
When you look at some places, there's students that are busing for 1.5 to 2 hours each way to school because they're not looking at that. They're not looking at the effect of the economy and to the community surrounding the schools. They say it's about programming, but there is no data to back that up.
Yeah.
There's nothing. We've asked for it. There is no data to back up that programming is better with X amount of students. There is no magic number. I don't believe for a second that this process that we're in it because of programming and because of students.
So if I can just have one follow-up question on that. Joey in the control room wants to show current boundaries for the schools, and maybe we can show that as I'm asking the question. Those issues that you say are important to schools and the community as a whole are you have to be in Burlington to address those particular issues. How can the Ministry of Education, sitting in downtown Toronto, be able to make those decisions for you without having numbers attached
because
to it.
this decision isn't just a Burlington issue, it's a rural community issue. I agree
it's a
wholeheartedly that
province-wide.
this is about a quality of life. I spoke to a parent whose child goes to Hayden, who is desperate. He's actually trying to transfer to Nelson. He would rather be bused because for 2 years he has been in a portable.
His son.
Sorry, 2 years. Sorry, his son. Excuse me. Thank you. Has been in a portable for 4 classes a day for 2 years. He's never attended a class inside the school. And so you ask about a low number being a problem, as when do we close the school? At what point do you have too many kids?
And there isn't.
Well, you can ask Milton that question
Soon.
because
Yeah, soon.
Milton
Soon.
is getting to the
Yeah.
point.
But Mark, it's
of
not
breaking.
just about numbers of students, and the process is not just about the provincial formula. Because I'll tell you, again, part of the reason I wanted to do this tonight, there were 2 public input sessions in Burlington, one in the north, one in the south, and I went to both of them, and they weren't public input sessions. They were
Information sessions.
No. There was paper on the walls. It was a self-serve.
Yeah,
I've never
it
heard
was.
of a self-serve community
And-
information
With very
session.
skewed data. I
Like,
mean, there's
like
And no meeting minutes.
Yeah.
There and it was funny because it was actually
It's
one
an
of our
open house
central
is what it
students
is.
It was, yeah.
pointed it out to one of the superintendents who was assuring her that her questions and her comments were going to be answered and considered. And she looked at him and it's grade 12 student and she said, "How? You're not even writing them down. You don't even have a pen."
Somebody
and
up-
when you
yeah.
have a student in grade 12 pointing out to a superintendent of education, this is wrong. You're not even recording anything here. How can you tell me that my questions and my concerns are being answered? That's questionable, right?
It's a
I would agree that those types of questions should be asked to your trustee because they do represent you folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where do your trustees stand on this issue?
Again, much like park parents that sit on a board, you have a trustee who is a voted member who is going to
Stand for re-election.
Stand for re-election. I'll mention that we've had a discussion. Our mayor here in Burlington, Rick Goldring, is a Nelson alumni. We had several parents come up and ask and say, "Well, we should ask the mayor to come out and speak on our behalf." And I said, "That's political suicide. The man is not going to go out and stand behind a single school and alienate the other 75 or 85% of his constituency just to back a school. That doesn't make sense."
Especially when it's not a municipal issue, it's a
But
school
the
board.
issue is too is there's a gentleman within our who put together a PowerPoint. I have it here today, and he actually pulled census data and compared it next to the actual Burlington
good,
data,
yeah.
and they're actually 4% off on their numbers. They're asking their population numbers they're projecting for 2025. We've already hit.
Yeah.
So they're so far off on their numbers. It's incredible. So
Yeah.
the frustration as parents has been that you can't even rely on the data that you're getting to be factual. So we're now being forced to coalesce in our own little groups and talk about, okay, what data is real? Where did
Yeah.
they get the LDAP data for Hayden? How did all this happen? How did that happen?
And the changing data that has been being presented throughout this process too starts as one thing and is changing by millions and millions of dollars throughout the process at the drop of a hat.
I'm sorry.
Millions.
But could you just explain that a little bit further?
Renovation
In
budgets.
the student information profiles, they will give you the cost, the facilities cost per school. And at the beginning, it was one thing, and then just one day in January flipped, and all of a sudden it was like a $30 million difference between.
But that's an issue with correct information coming from the Board of Education.
But it's still
isn't
not
it?
correct.
No, it's
But I'm saying
yeah,
the
it
fact
is an
that
issue.
it is incorrect
It was
is
a
really
mistake, and they've
another
come out
issue.
and said it was a mistake.
Okay.
But it's not just about numbers, Mark. But
Well, what is it about,
Okay,
Casey?
well, I'll take. It's about. To me, it's about what are you going to do with this land? And I know there's a lot of cynical people out there like me. But in the '90s, there was a feeder school called Mohawk Public School in the
Yes.
East End near where I live,
Yeah.
and they closed that school for a while. They didn't. That one they didn't tear down and pave over. They closed it, but found all of a sudden within a very short time They had way too many students and reopened it. My worry with this, from the community perspective, is what's going to happen. You know, I'm being a bit cynical here, but why are we looking at certain parcels of land, and what's going to happen to them? Are we just going to pave them over? I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Well, I do, because in Hamilton that happened. In Hamilton they closed a downtown school, and the Hamilton board now has to buy that back because they need that school back.
And you were talking about somebody maybe looking at Central.
Okay, we've got a telephone call, so let's get to that, and we'll get back to that question in just a moment. Is the caller there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. You're on the air with us.
Yeah, I haven't actually been able to watch the show, so I'm not sure if this has been discussed or not. But I'm just wondering why the process is even still continuing when it was basically initiated on Ms. Scroots. You know, I went to an initial meeting where we were told by Stuart Miller that it's all about curriculum, and then as the process goes on, you realize it's not. It's all about money. And now this whole issue with Hayden School being the loan that they have, and they have to pay it back by selling land, and so now it's gone from this process being initiated for the students. Now it's all about money because of a school that was open that didn't even need to be opened. If that school wasn't even opened, there would be no issues. The schools in the north would be booming, and kids wouldn't be having to have phys ed in the hallways, and Central wouldn't be a problem, Lester B. Pearson wouldn't be a problem, and the kids would all be able to walk to school like everybody's done for all the years we grew up. We all had schools that were local, and there's just so many issues that just seems like common sense isn't involved in this whole process. It's just misconceptions and greed, and people that made mistakes, and now they're covering the tracks.
Okay, appreciate that comment and question.
Yeah, I can. I actually did see. I do know what he's talking about. A document kind of came floating around, I think, this past couple of days, and in it, it seems to be outlining an agreement between the board and the ministry, where the ministry was providing funds to build a school in Alton Village, and I think another school, and possibly some upgrades as well. And but the board had to agree to pay back those funds. This is what it looks like by the sale of future property. I did read the document myself. It does look like that's what it's saying, and that is concerning, because since the beginning, all we've heard about is that this is about programming, this is about the students. But then when something like this comes to light, and you're seeing it written out in black and white, that they're agreeing in 2009 that they're going to sell property in the future to pay for this school, and also that they are aware that that school is going to create underutilization in all the other Burlington schools. That to me, those questions need to be answered before we proceed with this process.
Well, in just the about minute that we've got left, I agree with you, and that those should be answered by the Board of Education, but on an ongoing basis. It shouldn't be just because schools are closing. This is when the school boards were taken back and reduced in responsibility and so on under the Harris government. I think we as a community lost an awful lot. But those types of questions have to be answered regardless of the closure of schools. So unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to resolve this this issue today, unfortunately. But I want to thank both of you for joining us. And we're going to hear from Bateman and Pearson next. So stay tuned to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome Welcome back to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr with my co-host Casey Cosgrove, and if you want to get involved in the conversation, you can go to Twitter, #TheIssue, or Facebook, The Issue, or Joey in the control room will run our phone number along the bottom, and you can call in and have your say, or just make your comment. We are talking about, in this portion of The Issue, Pearson and Bateman. So Casey, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, the same kind of thing. I mean, like I said, we had 4 schools that are slated for closure. We wanted to hear from all 4 of them. Nothing more complicated from that. So we have Rory Nissan here from Lester B. Pearson, and Diane Nasev from Robert Bateman School. And Rory, I'll start with you. Just give us the general overview of why you're here and what you're thinking.
Well, I'm here because I attended Pearson High School. I had a great experience there right from the get-go. Grade 9, small school environment was really easy for me to really get into. You know, I was a nerdy grade 9er, and I didn't have to deal with bullying like you would at a larger school. I was able to play sports. I played rugby. I was a bit of a runt, but I played rugby anyway, and I could do that because it was a smaller school, so there were more opportunities. So it was, there were fantastic teachers. It was an excellent learning environment. And it was a bustling school at that point in 2000, 2001.
So why is it on the list, in your opinion? Why is Pearson, why are they going after Pearson too, potentially?
They're obviously below the 65%
at 65% right now.
So that makes you eligible for closure.
It makes us eligible, it sure does. Although we didn't come up with these rules, and we would change them if we could. And it's a bit of false math going on here when Hayden, a school just a couple kilometers north, is bursting at the seams right now with students whose older siblings used to go to Pearson.
Right.
Why is that? Why is one school completely oversubscribed and the nearest school undersubscribed? There's some real addition and subtraction that I think the Halton District School Board needs to work on.
Okay, and we dealt with this with Central and Nelson. I get it. You don't agree with the numbers. Doesn't matter. Those are what you have to deal with. Now, in 2020, Pearson's going to be down another 10% in student population, according to the Halton District School Board. Mm-hmm. At what point do we say, okay, enough's enough? Mm-hmm. Like a business. Mm-hmm. Sometimes businesses have to close down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they open in somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And you either follow that and move where that business is going, or you get another job. Yeah. I don't see the difference.
You're focused on the numbers for the moment. We can talk numbers, or we can talk like reality, people's lives. But if you want to talk numbers, north of the QEW, utilization is at 87%. So, is the problem the fact that Pearson doesn't have enough students, or is the problem the distribution?
The boundaries.
It's certainly the distribution and the boundaries, especially when Pearson has the smallest ability to get the smallest number of feeder schools. Why is that? You could come up with many number of reasons, but it needs to change. If Pearson had the same number of feeder schools as it had when I was a student there, it would continue to be a great, smaller school, but actually not very small.
But let's get to Bateman. Bateman has been around for
forever.
It's like Central and Nelson. So why is it slated for closure?
I think a lot of the reason that Bateman suddenly came into the mix is because its proximity to Nelson. And I would say what Russ said earlier is that we serve completely different populations. Bateman has the most diverse population. We go right from your Community Pathways program, which are your children who are in wheelchairs, who are not going to graduate with high school diplomas, but are going to graduate with a community service diploma or an employability diploma, both of which we've been recognized as the only school board in Ontario that has diplomas for children who are not going to get a regular high school diploma.
But can't that orientation shift if Bateman were closing and shift to Nelson?
No. So this is the other thing that people don't understand, right? At Bateman, so as I was saying, we go from the CPP, the Community Pathways, all the way up to the International Baccalaureate. So we have the diverse programming. You have children in essentials, you have students in academic, in applied, all the way up to that IB student, the International Baccalaureate, which is again an internationally recognized program. We can't shift because the children in that community pathways program cannot go in a regular classroom. They are in wheelchairs. They need special equipment. Millions of dollars has been put into Bateman to make it not only AODA, so not only accessible according to the Act, but accessible because these children's needs are that way. So I am an out-of-boundary parent. Both of my children are at Bateman, one in the International Baccalaureate program and one in the LEAP program. So I look at both ends of the spectrum in my house. And both of my children have found a home at Bateman. It talks to the diversity, it talks to the inclusion, the environment there. You can't just pick these kids up and expect them to transition, because that is not going to be fun at all, but also to find the same inclusive environment that they found. And it really has been built.
So how would they make allowances for these students if Bateman were to close? Do you think they would just say, oh, it doesn't really matter to us? No, they wouldn't say that. They can't say that.
They can't, because again,
so
we have...
they'd make other arrangements for
They would,
the
but
kids.
the issue that you run into is that the other arrangements that are being proposed does not meet the needs of these students. So the first proposal to bus them to Milton was, I mean, you can't, children with special needs, special education needs, to put them on a bus for that long. Now the current one to move them to Nelson means we have to put an addition onto Nelson. Why would we spend millions of dollars when we're facing a $2 million cut in special education this year to build a wing onto a school when you have a school that is perfectly outfitted, has a pool attached, which is another requirement of the Community Pathways program. There has to be the recreation in the pool. So you have a school that's perfectly built for it. And I get that Bateman is underutilized. We are. But the services that we provide would be very difficult to move. Could it be done? Yes. But I can tell you that you might have some human rights cases on your hands.
And also the cost factor.
The cost would be huge. The millions of dollars that have gone in, because these classrooms have specialized kitchens, they have customized equipment to lift these kids in and out of their wheelchairs, or specialized toileting environment. So in order to duplicate that, you're looking at millions of dollars. The other concern that I have is, okay, let's say we say we're going to put this wing on Nelson. What are the chances it'll be ready by 2018? So these children in this school, my son included, is on his 5th school. He's in grade 8. He's been in 5 schools. And that's common. So now you're going to take these children, you're going to move them to a temporary location while we wait for their permanent location to be ready. So now you're transitioning. And what happens with the transition with these children is they lose months of education.
Okay.
So I have a question. I'll ask Rory. I think everywhere we go, obviously people, there are very good and significant reasons for people not wanting their school to close. We get that. We also get that.
But I think Bateman is a little bit different.
I think there's a unique element to each of the schools. Bateman certainly is in the diversity of their student population. There's no question. But so the question I want to ask, because I have respect for the people that have gone through this process, and these are not easy decisions, I'm sure, but as you saw from our last 2 guests, not everybody's clear on numbers and data and why the boundaries can't change. The public is not clear on these things. So what I'm going to ask Rory a bit of a different question. So getting away from the sort of protecting our own school piece, what do you think is the ideal thing for the kids? We haven't talked much about the kids tonight. What do you think is the ideal situation given all this complex sort of set of circumstances they're dealing with? What's best for the kids in Burlington?
Yeah, good question. To be honest with you, the kids should be at front and center of this process. They should have been mainstreamed in this process right from the beginning. And so I don't want to speak on behalf of kids, but I'll tell you what I think anyways.
That's what we're here.
That's why I'm here.
But
without speaking for kids, I think, as a student myself, formerly, I certainly would not want to spend the majority of my high school career in a portable. I certainly would not want to spend the majority of my career having gym classes in the hallway, not being able to use Wi-Fi in 2017. That's the situation that we're under at Hayden right now. So we need to get back to basics. We need to fix the prima facie problem, Hayden overcrowding, before we even think about closing schools. We're jumping ahead of steps. Remember, we have apparently 1,800 empty pupil spaces right now. Hayden's population is less than that. That was, I'm sorry to say, in my honest opinion, a $30 million plus mistake that was made. Maybe Hayden should have been.
The building of Hayden. He's talking
Building
about.
Hayden was a huge mistake, you might say.
Okay.
It was a big one.
You have said it, so.
Well, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Hayden's here to stay, and
It's
and
here.
it will be.
It's
but
here now.
but
You're
the
absolutely right.
overpopulation of Hayden
gotta
is
fix
an
that.
interesting thing that needs to be looked at.
May I on the question about kids, and it is about kids, it's about parents, it's about teachers and the community. And one thing I haven't heard since I started working and supporting Pearson was one person come up to me and say, hey, actually, you know what, we should be closing schools. These schools ought to be closed. As a taxpayer, I want to close these schools. Not a single person has said that to me, because it doesn't make sense from a financial point of view either, and because people actually want...
From whose financial perspective doesn't it make sense?
There's so many risks involved in closing a school when a population is growing in a city, and it certainly is in Burlington if you look at the latest census data. So
Burlington
huge risks.
has the oldest population of any municipality in the Greater Toronto area.
Yeah. And where do you
Which
think
means
those
it's gonna
houses are going to
turn
go?
What about turnover, Mark?
Turnover
And-
needs to
and I agree with you 110% if you can do that, and you can correct me if you took math, that it has to have a longer term view, because neighborhoods do evolve, and you can see that as people grow older, then new people with young kids move in, and so on. I agree. I get that. I completely agree. What we're dealing with is 4 schools for closure under the formula now, and it doesn't take into account that long-term planning. So we're going to take a break right now, and we'll be right back here on The Issue. I'm Mark Carr with co-host Casey Cosgrove. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr, and we're with my co-host Casey Cosgrove, and we're talking about Pearson and Bateman schools in Burlington, potential closure, and really this can go to any municipality in the province of Ontario, and I think any municipality that has a closure is fighting the same kind of a battle, and everybody agrees on one thing: the formula. Get to your MPP, and if you don't agree with this formula, that's where the issue lies. Not with the school boards, not with local people doing it. Get to your MPP. Now, I'm going to be probably in trouble for that, but Casey, you wanted to say something.
I just want to say one of the options that's still on the board among the 6 is no school closures. That's still there. Now, I'm told I'm naive to think that's going to be considered, and I say, why is it still there then? Why is this option still there? And having followed along, and certainly again, there are people in those rooms tonight, is one of the meetings that have dug into things that we don't know about for sure. But as a citizen, as a resident who can read and think, I can think, I have not seen any compelling reason that backs any one of these options other than the no school closures. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be one of the best cities in Canada to live in. Schools are a big part of that. And
I agree.
And
I agree.
So if the process in Burlington has been something that people haven't been clear about, why rush to judgment? Why rush to do this and pave over something that we might regret 2 or 3 years from now.
Who says we're going to pave over it? Because I went to an elementary school way back when, and that has since closed as an elementary school and opened as daycares and a number of associations that are in that school.
Which is great. But
all I'm saying is it can be another use.
Yes.
It's funny that you mentioned daycares because Pearson has a co-op nursery that services 100 families right now. And due to regulatory and legislative issues, if Pearson closes, those spaces are probably gone. It's not easy to move a nursery, believe it or not. It's not as easy as moving around boundaries or anything like that. And that program is fantastic for the students as well. That's one of the value added of Pearson. But I want to get back to the question, why is no closure an option? It's an option because this is a democratic process. Because there are school board trustees who are hopefully watching right now who recognize that they are going to the ballot in a year's time and that there is little to no support among the population for any closures. The only people who support it are bureaucrats at this point. So, and I want to say there's more to democracy than elections. There's something called social license. That's what they're missing here. They're missing the social license. The citizens, the parents, the kids, none of them want this. And if you lack that social license, you don't have a legitimate rationale for proceeding.
Rory, all that does sound very legitimate. If the Board of Education, a non-entity, but the Board of Education is forced by the province to do something, I mean, they have to do it, don't they?
They're not forced to close a thing, though. That's for sure. I tell you that right now. There's no.
But
they're required to do a review, and that's fine. Yeah. In fact, a review is great because Hayden is, like we all know, terribly overcrowded. This review had to happen to fix the Hayden problem.
But so you're saying that the Hayden issue is really a catchment area issue, and we are dealing with a director of education who is an intelligent person. There are a lot of highly intelligent people working at the school boards.
And extremely well-meaning, I'll say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they start there first?
Because part of the issue that they keep looking at is this 1,800 or 1,500, the number keeps changing, empty pupil places. So in the back of their mind, they're thinking, even if I move boundaries, I still have those empty pupil places. But I go back to, again, it shouldn't be just about the numbers. It should also be about the programming and the quality. So I agree Hayden is way overpopulated because there was students pulled from Bateman, there were students pulled from Pearson, there were students pulled from M.M. Robinson who all suddenly are at Hayden. So if we realign the boundaries, it would help with this underpopulation, overpopulation. The other piece that we should be...
So why isn't that the first thing that the Director of Education should do rather than starting the PAR committee and PARC committee and so on? Just reorganize the boundaries and fill up those schools that are on the list, like Pearson, and not necessarily Bateman, but Pearson. I'm talking about in this situation. Build up the numbers, and and then Casey's option of no school closures works. You can do that now without talking to anybody.
The other piece that I think you need to look at that people don't realize is the International Baccalaureate program. We have kids who come from Hamilton, from Oakville, from all over the city to attend the program at Bateman because it's such a great program. So if we have this fantastic program, why are we not promoting that as well, again, to increase your numbers? So to me, it should be, okay, how do we rearrange and how do we promote the program we have to increase our numbers in order to be able to say, okay, the other issue that they run into is that when kids go from grade 8 to grade 9, there's a lot of them that leave the public school, go over to the Catholic school. Why is that happening? So instead of going through this tearing the community apart.
That's a whole other issue.
I know, but all I'm saying is there's a lot of other things that could be looked at instead of tearing the community apart, because I agree it's tearing the community apart.
Okay, so Rory, why wouldn't they look at simplistic, I mean, much more simplistic than
I'm sure they
closure?
have.
It's in there. It's in there. It's among the
why
options. It's
hasn't that
sprinkled in,
happened?
and we have pressed really hard. We've actually provided very legitimate options for changing the catchment. It's not particularly hard. There's one school, the name escapes me, but it's actually split currently, and bringing those students over to Pearson and CH Norton Public School, and it's very close to Pearson. And those kids, this is just another example of some mistakes being made. These kids have to say goodbye to their friends as they go to 2 different high schools from one public school. Imagine that. Anyhow, you know, there's new builds going on north of Dundas Street right now. There's more in the pipeline.
In the Alton community.
Alton community, Alton West, east of Appleby Line. There's a lot going in, and those houses, and there's going to be apartment buildings. There's going to be a whole range. They're going to get filled up, and they're going to get filled up with young families. It's going to happen because people really want to be in Burlington for good reason.
Because it's the Halton District School Board, they have to take into account the growth in the fastest growing municipality in the country, if not North America, is Milton.
Yeah.
And there's only a certain number of dollars to go around.
But that shouldn't come at the cost of Burlington. That's where you kick it up to the province
Or
and
we
you
should
say
be
we're building big time in Milton. How are you going to manage this?
Well, go ahead.
The
other thing to keep in mind is Halton is the least funded board in Ontario. We get the least funding in Ontario.
That's because a lower number of students?
Well, it's because the formula, again, going back to the formula,
Provincial
it's because
issue.
It is, but if you look at it and you say, okay, we are one of the growing school boards, board-wide, why are we the least funded? Right? So if we need to look at that too, because you're right, Milton is growing like crazy, but if Burlington keeps getting tagged as one of the greatest communities to live in, then logic says, long term, we're going to start to live.
Long term, short term, I think.
But nobody here, nobody in Burlington is everybody recognizes that we need to take care of Milton. That's not even a part of the conversation. That's obvious.
But it is from a dollar perspective because there are only so many dollars flowing into the Halton District School
As I
Board.
said, as a citizen.
On a per pupil basis.
Yeah.
So.
It's the way the grant for student needs works. It's not completely per pupil. It's partial per pupil and partial. There's a whole bunch. It's so confusing.
It's not clear.
Yeah.
So in a minute, Casey, I'm going to let you have your last say on this issue. Go ahead.
Oh, that's it?
No,
you want me to do it now?
You can
Okay.
have your last say.
Nothing new. I mean, I think that, these meetings were going on with trustees and board tonight. I said it at the start of the show that I think it was really important for people who are passionate about their schools to come on here and give their take on why they aren't the right school to close. But you'll notice, and I'm noticing growing interest between the schools. Nobody wants to be pitted against each other. This is not, I'm not sure if this was the expectation. It's not happening. People are, of course, defending the value of their own school and neighborhood, but nobody's pitting against each other. And I do think until we have a clear process and clear information that we understand, people are going to say, no closures.
Well, from my perspective, it's a provincial issue. And it has always been a provincial issue, and we have to correct that first. So call your MPP and get them to work on the issue. That's it. Sorry, we're finished. We'll have to have another show like this.
See where this goes,
Casey. And we want to thank you for tuning in and watching tonight to The Issue here on Cogeco Television. Truly local television. Good night.